on? Welcome to yet another episode of the Ascended Life Podcast. This thing is blowing up quick.
Yes, it is. And we're having a great time in the meantime.
I'm Dar-El. Do we need to keep introducing ourselves? Or well, I guess we need to keep doing that.
Well, I'm Kesley.
Right. Yeah.
I think we do. I think it's our standard. You know, there might be new people joining, checking out different topics that we're covering.
You're right. So if you learn our names now, that means you were with us from the beginning. I feel good about that. So today's episode is sponsored by Natural Shilajit. It's a great company. I don't know how much you guys know about Shilajit. We're going to end up doing a health and wellness series eventually. But Shilajit is a mineral, or some people say it looks like a rock, but it's not. But it's found in a lot of mountains in Asia. I mean, you can get it from different mountains, not really on this hemisphere. And it's basically refined to a point by which they put it into like this resin. And I mean, I've been on it for years. And I mean, the amount of energy that I get from it is just phenomenal. It's just next level. It's amazing. You've tried it. I've tried it. We give it to clients and a few of our online programs. So it's been great so far.
What I can say is about the time I started taking Shilajit, I was getting off of caffeine and transitioning from drinking coffee. And the energy that I got from the Shilajit was really helpful as I was making that transition. So if there's people out there who are like trying to get off the coffee or reduce the caffeine, this is a natural way of getting energy that's not, a stimulant per se. So it's really powerful stuff.
So check out Natural Shilajit. We'll put our affiliate codes. We are affiliated with this company. We'll put our affiliate codes in the description and feel free to check it out. Get a discount on us. Shilajit is going to change your life. I think that's the perfect segue into today's topic.
It very relevant to today's topic.
Very relevant. So Kesley Joe Tweed.
Yes.
How do you stop aging?
Wow. Well, I think the bigger question is, right, there might be some people out there who are like, well, can you actually stop aging? Can you age in reverse? Is that a real thing? So what are your thoughts on that? Well,
my answer to all of those are yes, for sure. I mean, I'm 40 and, I get that a lot of people don't believe that I'm 40. If I didn't have the grays or the whites, I don't think, in my beard, I don't think anybody would believe it. But yeah, there's that. So, I mean, it's not what I think. I know that aging can be reversed. Aging can definitely be slowed. And a lot of the studies that I've done have shown that aging can be stopped for sure.
Yeah.
So what are your thoughts? I mean, I think maybe you can talk more practically, right? Because I think that you've seen benefits from check out this before and after of Kesley. This is before Kesley was vegan. And then this is after Kesley is vegan.
Yeah.
But I mean, you've seen anti-aging stuff from just going through the vegan lifestyle, as have I. Here are my before and afters. This is before I was vegan and after I was vegan. So, I mean, these are just kind of things. So, I mean, just give a little bit, because you're more recently vegan and more recent to this, right?
And I would say vegan's a big component of it, but also there was a lot of changes made around the same time, right? I think vegan was a huge foundational block that occurred that helped with the anti-aging or reversing of aging. But then there was also, even several years before that, a huge transition in terms of the spiritual and the emotional part of it, right? Like there was a lot of healing that was done. I think that's one of the big things that ages us, is when we're actually carrying baggage from the past, right? Like hurt that we've had in the past. So that occurred. I started meditating, right? So I don't think we can forget about those foundational pieces. So there was a huge leap that occurred at that point in time. But then also when I went vegan, it was like really miraculous.
Well, the only reason I say the vegan thing like this is this. Now, but you're different. You're the kind of person that does the work. And like, if you say that you're doing something mentally, you're doing something mentally. But I've been parts of groups where people have said stuff like, oh, well, which is true. Yeah. But they're like, oh, well, food is whatever frequency you think it is. And if your beliefs are so strong. Yeah. But all those people that I've seen, they look the age, if not older than they are, right? Yes. So it's like, I've heard that. But the reason, I guess, and thank you for bringing that or changing that gear. But the reason I talked about the food is because I think that it's one thing that I've seen people, no matter where they are in beliefs, that they physically can change. But you're 100% right. The mindset and stuff like that is huge.
And don't get me wrong, like going vegan was probably like the biggest part of the story.
Well, so let's do this. Let's walk through it, right? Okay. So let's go through the food-based things that you did, because I think that's foundational. It's something that people can easily do.
Yes.
We'll go with the food-based stuff, then we'll move on to the mindset work, and then I'll touch on a little bit of science as we go.
Well, and on the anti-aging part, right? Like we touched a little bit on like the physical part of it, like looking younger than maybe what we are. But there's also, for me, I think the other part of it was, I mean, I got pregnant at 39 and I didn't know if I could get pregnant, right? At 39, I was having hormone issues. I was having like a lot of irregularities.
Which
and
hormones?
a lot of I'm going to breeze over that question for right now. I was having a lot of irregularities with my period, a lot of like pain and things like that I know a lot of women suffer from. And so I thought, you know, I don't know if this is possible for me. So that was a big thing. Like I said, I didn't have a lot of energy. I was relying on caffeine just to have enough energy. And I think that's all part of, you know, the aging process as well. And then the aches and pains, right? Before I went vegan, there was a lot of inflammation in my body.
Right.
So I was having a lot of that, like, oh, I did some squats today and like, oh, my back hurts now, things like that. My knees hurt.
Since you're going to go this direction with it, I have to bring this in. So we have two types of aging. All right. We have something called your chronological age. And your chronological age means literally the clock starts once you pop out of your mom based on where you are now. So if 40 years have elapsed since then you're chronologically 40 years of age. If 100 years have passed, then you're chronologically 40 years of age. That's one type of age, but that's not the only type of age. We also have something called your biological age, right? And your biological age goes based on how you've cared for your body, the choices you've made, right? Are you choosing to meditate every day? Are you choosing to work out? What are you choosing to eat? Are you choosing to smoke or drink, right? So somebody could chronologically be 50 years of age, right? And but their real age could be 30 or 20, or it could work the opposite direction. Somebody could literally be chronologically 50 years of age, but they could be 70. Like say you choose to do crystal meth, you're gonna be 80 chronologically.
Right.
I mean, I'm sorry, biologically. You know,
right? So
that kind of is a caveat because you were in your 20s or 30s and you were having joint pains already.
Yeah, I would say that probably did start in my 20s because I was a marathon runner at that point, right? So that like the inflammation I had in my body from all the things that I was eating and thinking and doing, like that was creating a lot of, I had a lot of aches and pains at that age, which I don't have that now.
So let's bring it back to, because me being on the outside looking in, or as the advisory role in this whole thing, is the one that kind of guided you through a lot of these changes, not with the mindset, I wasn't here, you were already doing that kind of work, but with like and you were doing your food work based on the traditional stuff, but then when you met me, it kind of went outside of the box, right?
Low carb, high protein,
that kind of stuff,
kind of diet. Yeah.
So what I'm
minimal fruits.
Minimal fruits.
Very minimal, if at all. That was like a treat.
And they tell you that fruits are bad for you. Fruits are hands down the best food for human beings, but that's a whole nother thing, right? But so let's walk us through a little bit on how, I thought that bird was going to land on you.
That would have been pretty cool for the podcast.
Walk us a little bit through how, like, because let me just give a quick thing of what I saw, right?
Yeah.
So when we first got together, it was love at first sight, or maybe third sight. I don't know, but love early on, right?
I think it was connection at first meeting.
Speak for yourself. It was love for me.
Okay.
It was love for me. But anyway, with that being said, I remember thinking early on, I was like, wow, this girl gets her period and she looks like she's about 3 months pregnant.
You said this before. This is not the first time I've heard this. And for the record, he is right. It was very difficult because I would have jeans that were like completely loose, like practically falling off. And then when I got my period, it was like they were like, the bloating, so tight.
The bloating was crazy.
It was a real thing, and it was very uncomfortable. Like there was literally days where I didn't feel like I could go to work because I was so uncomfortable. And I know a lot of women deal with that.
Exactly, but it's all inflammatory. So I want to talk about, to start this whole thing about us stopping aging, right? Is as somebody who was in that body before and somebody who now I can't even tell when you're in your period at all anymore, right?
Yeah.
Can you talk a little bit about like how you felt, right? Like the feelings, like when you had that level of inflammation.
Yeah.
And not just in your menstrual, but in your joints and all these other things like that. Can you talk a little bit about that?
It was just uncomfortable. Like I said, right? Like especially the menstrual pain was to the point where there were some days where I just had to curl up in a ball and lay in my bed and I couldn't really do much. Like that was really difficult. But then, like I said, there were a number of things that I was doing. I was lifting really heavy and just like, plus the food that I was eating, there were days where I would just be like literally in pain. Like every part of my body would be in pain. And I think a lot of people think that's normal. I thought it was normal at the time. Like, oh, I had a really hard workout. all week long I was sore every single day, that's not necessarily a normal thing. It doesn't have to be that way. Like I can still work out hard now and I don't feel this. I'll maybe get some muscle soreness for like a day, but it's not this like prolonged like pain and inflammation. And oftentimes I just felt like I had like I almost was wearing like a water suit, right? Like I had just like this layer of like, especially when I got my period, like this layer of like water, like where it was just like, there was just excess on me. And I thought I would think at the time that it was like excess weight, like, oh, I ate this or that over the weekend. Like I must have gained like 5 pounds. No, that was inflammation from the foods that I was eating. It wasn't actually pounds. It was my body having a stress response because the things that I put in it, my body didn't know what to do with.
Yeah. Well, so, okay, that's how you felt before. Now, what about now?
Wow. Now,
like when you have your period, when you have your menstrual, or when you
I can,
working out?
I'll be completely honest. Like I can still tell, like as a woman, you can tell, like maybe there's a little bit of cramping and there's like a little bit of I guess what you would call bloating. But what I know now about our menstrual cycle, especially when we have our period, is that it is a release, right? So I think it's kind of like our body concentrating, even it's the toxic release physically, but it's also the emotional release from everything that's been built up for the whole month. So naturally your body's going to have a bit of a response to that, but it's not anything excessive. Like I can still wear the same clothes and feel comfortable in them. Whereas before I would have to like wear almost like
I'm happy that we're talking about this on the podcast, because I don't know if you're giving yourself enough credit for your growth, because you literally just went from saying that I used to have to, there were times when I had to curl up in a ball, like I couldn't move. So now when you're saying, oh, I can kind of tell. I my period's there. You know, I can't even tell.
Usually, now I have a backache. Like I have usually a backache on one side or the other. Or a little cramping on one side or the other, and that's.
But if you had to scale it, right? Like so, your old menstrual cycle, right? Scale of 1 to 10, 1 being the lowest, 10 being the highest. What was the discomfort or the experience then, and what is it now? If you had to give it numbers.
A 9 before and a 4 now.
Oh wow, that's a huge gap.
Yeah.
Where would you put childbirth?
In terms of pain?
Yeah.
A 9.
So your menstruation
maybe a 9.5. Maybe a 9.5.
Every month was the thame. This lady, for those of y'all who don't know, she pushed our baby out. Well, she didn't really push her out, but that she had the baby. You pushed for a little bit.
Yes.
At our place, at the old apartment, right there. So for you, this is no medication.
No
medication. This is a no meds mom right here, right?
Talking about that's the other part of the story that we probably need to talk about, is the biggest part of the like anti-aging and the health reverse is like being able to go through a completely natural birth and very natural pregnancy at 39. Right? I don't think my body was equipped to do that before. I know my body wasn't equipped to do that before.
But this is the thing though, right? Because they were trying to call you a geriatric birth, right?
Yes, so and don't work out. You can only do yoga and this and that.
We're not going to count that lady. But the people that were trying to call you a geriatric, that just doesn't count. That was nonsense. I'm going to probably edit this out, but I'm kidding. But anyway, but the reason being why they call you a geriatric birth is because you have to understand that the average 40-year-old American, right? The standards that they use are based on the average in the United States, right? The average 40-year-old American is biologically about 60 to 65 years of age, right? So heck yeah, that's old, right? But then you go and you do the complete opposite. You clean yourself up. You're on all these other things that we can go into later. And then you're actually completely uninflamed and vegan, right? So you probably went from the age of about 50 biologically to somewhere in your 20s easily. You know what I mean? So that's the kind of thing that I think that we need to understand, is like when we're seeing these stats, right? Like currently right now, I don't even like to give out these numbers, but 40% of the United States, and that's the low end. I'm lowballing this because I don't know the current stat. This is when I last checked in like 2018. 40% of the United States is overweight, obese. Now, obese means that you're morbidly overweight. Something like 75% of the country is like overweight, right? Or 70%. Now, mind you, the bodybuilders were technically counted as overweight as well. I used to think that was wrong because muscle is heavier than fat. But now that I know what I know about body mass index, and which is cap, but like, and like real body fat and stuff like that, it's like a lot of us were bodybuilders. A lot of us literally were overweight. And we just didn't consider ourselves overweight. But all that being said, all right, so you went from that to being able to give birth at 40, 39, 40. Like mentally, right? Like, how do you feel about the changes that were made? Like, and so in your body, right? Did you feel like, okay, this was one body and now I feel younger, or I feel older, or do I feel more alive, or like what were the feelings that you had?
Oh, I feel, yeah, more alive, younger, more youthful, more vibrant. Like, I think the biggest shift that I've noticed is the energy level. Like, I remember setting an intention like every single month back in these days that like I just wanted to have more energy.
Yeah.
I just felt drained all the time.
I remember those days.
And it was, I mean, it was partially the environment that I was in. I think that's a small part of it, right? But a big part of it was the way that I was treating my body physically and the things that were occurring at the time. And even just the recovery, right? Like, this wasn't a phase that happened overnight. It did happen very quickly, but it wasn't something, it took time for like, and I still feel that we just had that conversation the other day. I was like, you know, there are some days where I think, man, I wish I would have discovered this lifestyle earlier. And there's no wishes. There's no like, everything happens as it's meant to for a reason. But I would just say that I'm so grateful for the changes that have been made. And that
I'm grateful for you, like taking my leadership, and because a lot of people could have fought me or been like, this isn't what it is, but you really embraced my knowledge and the things that I've learned professionally and personally through experience. So you're a great woman to even be strong enough to be able to follow somebody else's lead in something, because you were already like a health. I mean, this girl was a professional bodybuilder. What you had done, women's physique. You could easily, what is this guy talking about? But she listened, and her life is better. I think that's the key to a good relationship, is we listen to one another.
There's something about like hearing the truth, and like, even if it's difficult to swallow at the time, like, you know, I really liked steaks at the time, right? Like, the thought of like giving up steaks was a little bit like, ooh, do I really want to do that? But there was something that rang true inside me. And I'd actually tried to go vegan once before I actually made the switch. And I still had a lot of beliefs that prevented that from really going well for me, because I was still on this like, oh, I got to have this many grams of protein. And so I felt really drained. But I think a lot of it was more the beliefs that I had versus how, plus I was trying to survive on, I mean, I was eating a lot of like just salads and greens and not a lot of other substance in my diet at the time. So I just removed the meat and I was eating basically like lettuce.
That's a common thing that people do.
Did not work.
When they
don't try that.
When they go plant-based or when they eat living foods, they don't know how to do it and they eat greens. And there's actually a lot of studies that show that when you uproot greens alone, these plants go into, because you're killing them, right? Like fruits are just given, right? They come off of the tree and they're dropped and they're self-sustaining, right? But a lot of leaves and these greens literally have defense mechanisms, but we can save that for the health podcast.
Yeah.
Now, for me, the things that I felt since I've made this change, the reason I made the change is my uncle. My uncle, when I was in my early 20s, he had a stroke. Well, there was two things. So my uncle had a stroke one year, and then the following year he left this realm via heart attack, right? And my little cousin Nate, he left in his arms. You know, it was very traumatic for him. I grew up hearing things like, hey, you know, you're of this color, so you guys are, you know, you're prone to high blood pressure. And I was like, it just sounded nonsensical to me. I started doing research and I found out that it was only people that looked like this body, or, you know, that were in the United States that had these issues, right? So what they were saying were like these black or dark brown, I don't even like you say black, so dark brown problems. Well, it actually turned out that it was based on the foods and stuff that we were eating in the United States, right? And somehow they disproportionately, I guess, some coincidence, the foods disproportionately affect all the dark brown people. That's a whole nother podcast, right? But anyway, I saw a lot of folks that I knew leaving this world at like 50 from heart attack. It was all heart attacks. It was all men and all heart attacks and all these other things. So I was like, nah, not me. So I went vegetarian, like, oh my God, 15, almost 20, I don't know, I'm 40. So I was like 24, 15, 20 some years ago, you know what I mean? So yeah, so that was what got me into it. Now to tell you the things that I noticed, now vegetarian, I actually felt worse when I went vegetarian because I just stopped eating meat and I just substitute everything with cheese. So it was like, and the cheese in the US, man, you cannot get away with it. I had more heart problems after from eating all the cheese than I did from just eating the meat, right? So I didn't get hip to that until I was about in my 30s, I believe. And then I just gave up. It was about 10 years ago. And I was like, something's not right with this dairy. And I literally gave up dairy when I moved to Atlanta. So I would bounce back and forth. And that was almost 8-9 years ago. So I was at 31, 32 or so, and I gave it up. So anyway, but the distinction that I felt when I gave up all meat and dairy, went plant-based, to now is incomparable. Literally, I was having like heart palpitations. I was heavily drinking. I was in a party phase. I was in the Coast Guard, and I was drinking a lot. And I am not blaming the alcohol. The alcohol just exasperated it. The food is what caused it.
Yeah.
Because I remember having times where just my joints were kind of beginning to hurt, right? And my face was just so puffy. My body was just so bloated. You know what I mean? And this went on for quite a time. And I would just, like you said, I would feel tired or feel heavy or couldn't get up out of the bed, didn't have the energy for different things. And the switch, my goodness, when I made the switch to just let go of the cheese and the meat, it's almost like infinite amounts of energy. You can do whatever you want, whenever you want. I noticed that I literally started to age backwards, like literally age backwards. Felt amazing, looked younger. Mindset, spirituality, right? Like I just became, once I stopped eating death, I literally, like my spiritual, I'm not saying that you can't. That is so true. I'm not saying that you can't be spiritual while you're eating meat, right? But it's just harder. It's more difficult. And it's like, if you're eating things like, the universe is a living universe, right? We're living in a living universe. God is a living God, however you want to look at it, right? And if we're eating things that are death, we're further away, or things that are dead, we're further away from that vibration. If we're eating things that are alive, we're closer to that vibration. So I could say that like the biggest jump that I saw spiritually, hands down, unequivocally, is when I stopped eating dairy and meat. Yeah.
That is, I remember that puffiness as well, the face puffiness. That was a big thing. But the phrase, you just said it, that turned me in a moment.
Yeah.
You're eating death.
Yeah.
Oh.
Yeah. I remember that.
After that, I could never go back. I could never go back. That was a life-changing moment and day.
I remember that day. So that's the physical side. That's the food side of it. I think you may have been on your mental journey a little bit longer than I was. Your mindset and your mental journey. So let's talk a little bit about that. Why don't you tell us? So what was that like? What was your whole mindset like, or when you were getting that? Because this predates all of the food. Yes. I think, I'm going to put this out there. I think that had you not done that mindset stuff, I don't think you would have been ready to do the food stuff at all.
No, I don't think so.
I don't think that's most of us.
No, and the spiritual part of it, right? Because I think that was another piece of it for me. There were a couple things. You said the you're eating death thing. Then you showed me this video of this woman who's, I think, about 80, and she's completely raw vegan, and she literally looks like she's maybe 45, maybe 40.
And we got to get away from the vegan word now, because I'm noticing that, because
plant-based,
because she's about, what she calls herself, living foods is what she does.
Okay, right? Eating living foods.
Yeah,
okay.
Yeah, that's the way she looked.
Anyway, that did it for me. And then the third thing was, like you said, the spiritual part of it was, at the time, I remember thinking, you know, I want to have a clear vessel. I really wanted to hear divinity speaking through me and speaking to me. And I felt that with that energy of an animal that had passed in my body, that I was not able to do that. And I noticed that consciousness jump immediately. So that's a big piece. But to get back to the mindset work, for me, I remember before I went through, especially like my healing journey, you know, married at 23, divorced in my late 20s, and I carried that weight of like that whole journey, that whole experience for a good 5, 6, 7 years. And literally, like, you could see it in my eyes, you could see it in my face, you could I felt it in my body. I remember at that time too, a lot of back pain, a lot of shoulder pain, and I believe our emotions manifest as physical ailments in our body.
For sure.
And as physical issues, right? So a lot of the issues I was having were remedied about that point in time. I had high blood pressure because, again, stressful job. I was traveling a lot. So I was just kind of eating whatever I could find that I thought was healthy or low calorie or whatever. And I just reached a point where I was like, I can't go on like this. Like, I can't go on even in my job, right? Like, take the rest of my life out of it. Like, just looking at my corporate career, I can't go on like this for another 30 years.
Yeah.
Like, this is not going to work. I've got to do something different. Like, I've got to release this weight. And just through like synchronicities and the right people, I started meditation, James and Sharon saying like James is my fitness coach, and Sharon's his wife, and honestly, like they like provided so much information and so many resources. So like started doing the Tony Robbins events and went into his Date with Destiny. That was a huge load off. Like started meditating, as I said, like went and got my Reiki master. And it was like, I talk about like, I used to feel like there was this ball of emotions that was like this ball, like this heaviness that I just carried like in my gut, but like my sacral chakra. And after unraveling all of this and a lot of journaling and self-reflection and traveling alone for several months, it was like a weight was lifted, and you could see it in my face. I remember my former boss, she saw some pictures on Facebook or something, and she was like, wow, like I can tell you're happy. I can tell you're different because you have a light in your eyes that I've not seen before. Like your eyes, like you just look different.
Wow.
And that was literally like, I aged in reverse just by doing that emotional and mental work.
Wow.
That was a big piece of it for me.
Wow. I think for me, that's powerful. That is, wow.
And then some big life changes that I had to make as well. I had to really look at my life and say like, okay, is this grind that I'm doing, waking up at 5 o'clock in the morning every day and going straight until 10 o'clock at night and working out twice a day and all the things that I was doing, like, is this really worth it?
See, mine was the complete opposite.
And I had to make some changes.
Food led to my consciousness shift. Because I'm always a guy of willpower. Like right now, I'm on day like 3 of a water fast. I haven't eaten food in like 3 days, right? So I was always the guy, if I set my mind to do something, I can just do it, right? So that was my makeup. But then it was like, once I started to change the way that I ate like this, it like opened me up to like, because I would have these thoughts and I wanted to meditate and I wanted to do these things, but I never made it a part of my life, right? Like I started in the military, but I would start and stop. But something changed when I started to change my food.
Yeah, well, and I can say that's true for me too, because I've made several different food shifts throughout my life. And the first shift occurred when I went from eating like processed food and lean cuisine and like all these like low calorie
That was my whole childhood growing up, those TV
right? Like sodas and beer and all this stuff to eating like at least a very like natural, like real foods, right? Like meats and vegetables and a lot of meats and vegetables, essentially. Like that was even better. And the first consciousness shift occurred after I made that change. So that was like a stepping stone to be ready for the next next series of big changes that would happen when I went vegan.
So what happened for you, it sounds like you're saying mindset, food, but then the food segued to another mindset change.
Yeah, it was really, I think it was really the food, then the mindset and the spirituality, and then more food.
So it all starts with, I'm telling you, as somebody who made a living for my first 6 years in Atlanta, I was a coach, a wellness coach, a trainer. I'm telling you, if you want to change a person, or if a person wants to change, they got to change what they eat.
Change your food, change your life.
Change your whole life real quick, right? So for me, it was like I changed the food, and it just, my consciousness, like I always have thought at a deep level, but it took me to another level of considering why I'm here. What am I doing? Who am I, right? Like, so that was the key things for me. But I will say that, like, for me, when I realized or was taught that the world or the universe literally reacts to our thoughts. And when I really saw that, right, and it became factual, a lot of changes started to happen for me. And I'm like, oh, wow. So when you're saying like, I like how the Spanish people say down, well, let me not say Spanish, but Spanish speakers, that there's no like, how old are you? If you would say in Spanish is ¿cuántos años tienes? Which means how many years do you have? How many years
you have? So how many years in this realm?
Yeah, do you have, right? So like we in the US, we're really conditioned to like brainwash ourselves into aging, you know? Like I don't even celebrate birthdays anymore on that first thing.
Why are you sure about that? Yeah.
Well, I mean, like Prince said it in a video, and he was like, bro, you know, I don't celebrate birthdays. This is why I look the way that I do. And it's like, you had one birthday, and they have literally shown studies that show that by you literally ritualistically setting aside a day every year where you celebrate no matter how you feel about it, you're celebrating this, and you're programming your cells to say, I'm inching myself along, I'm inching myself along, and I'm inching myself along, right? So I don't celebrate that. When you had one birthday, there's literally the day that you were born. As to why you would celebrate the anniversary of that, I don't get that personally.
And there's a bit of a different philosophy from an astrological perspective. Your birthday is called your solar return. And so you could see your solar return as an opportunity to celebrate the rebirth into the new cycle.
But a solar return is drastically, even I'll do a solar return. Even a solar return's energy is different than, you had your birthday, right?
Yeah.
But the anniversary of a birthday is just the energy of, okay, well, now it's this year, and now it's this year, and now it's this year.
Yeah.
So like a solar return, that's completely different. You know
well,
what I mean?
And I think that goes into another like concept that I really like and I started to apply when it comes to like aging in reverse, is more about cycles versus years, right? Like looking at moon cycles, looking at solar return cycles, looking at seasonal cycles, because nature goes in cycles.
Yeah.
I don't imagine that tree is celebrating, you know, like 50 years on the earth. It's got different cycles that it probably goes through.
And so it's funny that you talk about that. So the whole thing about, we have to understand that in this realm, everything is put here to age us, to keep us limited, and to stop us from being what we really are, which is everything. So, for example, like you just said, right? You ever notice how summer just starts differently every year?
Yeah.
It hits at a different time every year, right? Your dad, Brad Tweed, shout out Brad if he's watching, he was telling me how it was kind of weird to him. I don't think weird is the word he used, but he was talking about this thing called a farmer's almanac. And how it's extremely accurate.
Based on astrology.
I mean? And it's based on astrology, right? So these days that we put into play, right? Like nature doesn't care if this is Monday or Saturday, September the 1st. And they don't care. Well, we made that up, right? But what they care about, or what nature responds to and cares on, are these real cycles that are happening, right?
Yeah.
And we're out of tune with that, right? I'll say another thing with aging is here, I can't tell what freaking day it is. You know what I mean? Being here when every day it's anywhere between like 80 and like 95, sunny every day, you lose touch. So as an American, I don't know how this does to the Colombians. I mean, I think they do look younger, but they got some dietary stuff going on. But anyway, but as an American being here and making these choices, I can definitely say that I feel drastically younger. Yeah. Just being here.
Well, and how do you feel? I mean, what do you think about the sun and vitamin D in terms of anti-aging?
Well, there's no such thing as vitamin D.
Being able to go out and ground in the grass and things like that.
So there's no such thing as vitamin D, number one. Let's clear that up. So
okay, let's talk about that.
Vitamin, let's talk about it.
Let's talk about that.
So a vitamin is something that you have to take externally because your body cannot make it on its own. An enzyme is something that you make on your that your body secretes within itself, right? So you can go into the sun and the sunlight hits your skin, and then your skin by that creates something that humans have called vitamin D. You can't call it vitamin D because it's an enzyme that you can synthesize on your own by just being in the sun without doing anything. Like when you eat foods, there's tons ubiquinone and there's tons of other enzymes that you make on your own, right? So just another misnomer that we've been given in this world, right? So that's that. But yes, being in the sunlight, there's tons and tons and tons. And I'm happy that the news in the US is finally reporting this, that sunscreen is actually horrible for you. It's terrible for you, you know? And people are talking about like, oh, well, you know, it's easy for like these more melanated people or these darker brown people to say, but what about us lighter brown people?
Yeah.
Well, as Kesley has discovered on her own research, that the studies have shown that the reason that people are burning and they can't be in the sun is not due to the lack of sunscreen, it's due to the foods that they're eating. The sun is the biggest detoxifier that you can be around, right? So people to say that they're getting sun poisoning, it's actually an acute detox response.
Yeah, I would encourage anyone out there to like do your own research on this because, you know, it's something that as a lighter skinned person, I have quite a bit of melanin that has been produced down here, but like it is a little bit scary to think about, oh, well, what will happen if I don't wear sunscreen? Well, do your research on the skin cancer rates and sunscreen and how long sunscreen's been around and how those skin cancer rates have actually gone
another
up.
Disclaimer though, you can't just go from doing sunscreen to just going out in the sun without it, right?
Yes.
It would be the same thing, and you can't just go and smoke crystal meth and just stop the next day.
Right.
You know, so it's like one of those things when you've been using these pharmaceuticals, any of them, when you've been using these things, you can't just go cold turkey, right?
And it has to be small doses, right? You don't just want to go all in. Like you really want to like give your body time to adjust. Yeah, give your body to be able to make all those different enzymes when you go out into the sun.
Exactly. But yeah, so the sun, the ocean, grounding. Grounding is a huge thing that we can talk about.
Grounding too.
Grounding is when you put your feet on the ground, on the earth, whether it be on sand, living grass, it can even be on concrete, believe it or not, stone. There's a process by which the earth is negatively charged and our bodies carry a positive charge. And the electrons of the earth flush. The negative electrons of the earth come into your body and flush out all of the positively charged electrons in a beautiful dance that completely cancels inflammation like that. And that's a grounding. So you need to be standing on the bare earth for at least 25 to 30 minutes a day, every day. You really need to be doing that.
You know,
that's a huge anti or reverse aging.
We've been throwing a word around a lot in this episode, and I don't know if we've really explained it. Inflammation. Like, break that down for people so they actually understand how that relates to aging.
So when you are in a scenario by which you hurt yourself, right? So say you break your ankle, or I'm going to make a macro analogy or comparisons to make it easy to understand. If you break your ankle or break your arm, or if you ever get a hickey or a knot on your head, or your boyfriend kisses you on the neck, right?
No,
so what happens is your body flushes an area and inflames it with either fluid or a different type of cells. It, depending on where it happens, is going to determine how the inflammation happens. But your body surrounds damaged areas with fluid to protect itself. So inflammation is actually a protective measure. Now the issue is it's meant to be done in small dosages for small periods of time. Like, your leg is never meant to be broken your entire life, right? Or your arm is never meant to be broken your entire life, right? So when you are in these scenarios where you cause damage to your body naturally inflames and sends liquid or gets larger as a protective method. Now the issue is this: when you're eating foods that are constantly around the clock damaging your body, then your body becomes constantly around the clock inflamed. So you're not going to see it necessarily externally. You will macro after a while, but you're not going to see it. But your internal, your organs, your pancreas, your spleen, your liver, your kidneys, your heart, your lung, these things are becoming inflamed. And when they're consistently inflamed, they don't function properly, and they lead to flat out people leaving this world drastically earlier than they should be.
Wow.
Imagine if it's literally what people are doing with food is the equivalent of, imagine your ankle's broken or your leg is broken. Hospice shalom, but your ankles or leg is broken, and then somebody's coming up and hitting it with a hammer every day, just tapping it with a hammer every day to just give it, and that would be the response. So you wonder why it's not going down. Well, it's due to the fact that you're constantly hitting it with that hammer, and that's what inflammation is.
Wow. That's good. I'm glad that we explained that, because I think that's a term that we hear a lot, and it's kind of difficult to really put it into terms of like, well, how does our food actually relate to that inflammation or the aches and pains that people think are like a regular part of aging? They
are not. All you got to do to see that is to look to these blue zones. But let's get into some productivity. So I'm going to give you guys some advice on how to stop aging flat out. Number one is your mindset, right? Your body. There are tons of studies. The placebo effect. Anybody who hasn't heard of placebo, it's literally when they give people a pill, right? So they'll have a study group. 50% will get the actual drug, and then the other 50% will get the actual just a sugar pill, right? They've shown that huge numbers, I think it's like 50 or 60% of the placebo group actually gets the exact same effect as the people who receive the actual substance, right? Without receiving the substance, right? So they just call a placebo to write it off. But how powerful is that to show you that your mind can convince you of a thing and then you literally manifest it, right? So there's the placebo study. There's also tons and tons and tons of other studies I can go into. There's a study that I watched that was talking about how they took a group of guys, right? And they had guys that were exercising their biceps. So they had 10 guys that for 30 days were doing bicep exercises. And then they had another group for 10 days. And all they did was just think about their biceps. The exact same amount of growth in both groups. They literally had it in both groups, right? So the mind is an extremely powerful thing. So the number one thing I'm going to say is you need to get your mind right. And whatever you think, you're going to become that. Literally, your body's going to do that.
Right? Like, just think about how many times a day you hear people, or maybe you even hear this out of your own mouth, like, oh, I'm not as young as I once was, or, we're not as good as we used to be, or, those sorts of things. Like, it's sort of like part of culture. Like you get together with your old high school friends or your family or whoever it is, and it's like, oh, like we're aging, we're getting older. Like, it's just a common
I mean, you just hit a point in life where you realize that you were like, your whole life you were raised inside of an insane asylum, but you're just the one person or one of the few people. It's a lot of people waking up, but like that just sees it. But when you step outside of that asylum and you look back at it, you're like, what the F? Like, what were we doing? You know what I mean? But anyway, that's number one. So you get your mind right. You're going to be what you think you are.
If I might add to that, I've noticed as well, right, ladies, you can relate to this, and probably men as well. When you look in the mirror, right, and your thoughts, like, let's say you're in a negative place and you're like, oh, I look so old, the wrinkles here, the gray hair's there, or the excess weight here, whatever it is. But then I've had periods where I've done like affirmations, about youthfulness or beauty or feeling or looking young. And then you go and you look in the mirror and it's like you look to yourself even. You look completely different.
Yeah, you do. Yeah, you're right.
It's almost like that, just that ability, like you're speaking and thinking a new reality into
You're programming your soul. When you program your soul, you change, you know? That's 100% right. So affirmations are powerful to speak. They're even more powerful when you write them for some reason. I don't know what that's about. The written word, I don't know. But anyway, so that's that. So the first one is getting your mind right. We both agree with that. And through your mind, we're going to add in things like meditation, because meditation is the key by which it's like exercise for your mind and your spirit. It allows you to control your thoughts, literally. So you're the captain of your thoughts. You're not just having things pop in your mind. You can't control it anymore. You're able to be mindful on command, right? That's number one. Number two, you need to get in contact with what it is that you're eating. And you need to change that, and you need to change that in a big way, right? We have found that plant-based works for us in a huge way. That may not be your thing, but get in contact with your body and figure out what it is that you need. Number two. Now, number three, which is a big one for me, is your environment as well. Yeah. Your environment is going to be, if you're a place like where we're at right now, where we can get organic and fresh, different fruits every day of the week, we're getting tons of sun in the ocean, ground every day. I think that it's going to have some positive effects on your body, right? So the whole name of this podcast episode was How to Stop Aging. Now, the reason that we chose that name is because we know that factually you can. Now, there's a study that was done. I've spoken on this many times. I'm going to speak on it again, on something that we have in our bodies called telomeres. Now, telomeres are the X's of our chromosomes and your genetic structure or your genetic makeup, right? So when you look at genes and when they split off, they're in these X's, right? Now, at the tips of these X's, you have something called, the tips of the chromosomes, you have the ends, and they're called telomeres. And they're kind of likened to like shoelaces. So the way that our cells replicate, at least the way that we understand it now, is that these telomeres break off at the end and they go off and they make new cells. And that the end of the X, or those shoestring caps, they decrease and they decrease and they decrease. And they do this for about 120 years, depending on how you treat your body, right? They're slower if you make more mindful choices like meditation and eating healthily. They go faster if you're doing things like eating like junk and drinking every day and doing drugs, right? Now, the reason that I know that we can stop aging altogether is they've recently discovered something that's called telomerase. Now, telomerase are this enzyme that floats around that your body makes on its own, and it literally goes in and it repairs the telomeres. And they found that it can do this indefinitely, like literally forever, right? For some reason, these telomerase are dormant in most of us, and we don't know why, right? But they found minimal activation of the telomerase from things like meditation and mindfulness and stuff like that, right? So I don't know if it's the food that's turning those off or what, but we literally have built in a clock stop in every human body. Wow. Called telomerase. So we need to figure out or get in touch with our telomerase, and that's the way to stop aging altogether. Wow. I'm not saying I know how to do it, you know. I study a lot of antiquity, and I've read a lot about people being drastically older than what we think is normal. But I'm all about following people that I can see tangibly have done stuff. And for me, these plant-based people that are 80 and looking like they're 40, that's the route that I'm going to go, you know? Yeah, exactly. So that's me. What's your tips? Your three tips I would say, so I touched on this earlier. I think doing the healing work is a huge one, because the emotional weight and the emotional stress that you are carrying, that will age you so rapidly. I remember in the period of time between the marriage ending and then like actually doing the healing work, I felt like I aged like 20, 30 years in that amount of time, because it was just this constant weight. I don't know how else to describe it. So I think that's a really huge thing. That ages us more than anything, especially if you're carrying like childhood trauma or things that happened in your teens all the way on up. Like we need to clear that out. Clear out the trauma. And along with that, I think it's really important to never stop growing, to continue to grow throughout our lives, because those of us who, as we age, develop this like fixed mindset, right? Whereas you just get into this routine and life is what it is, and you see on the news that this is life and, you know, we're all doomed. Like, that's not going to keep you young. If you're always learning something new, maybe you're traveling, maybe you're serving, maybe you're taking on a new hobby, you're just challenging your mind, challenging yourself, learning new things, expanding your consciousness, that
I think is another huge factor. I mean, I'm thinking of people who I know who are, who have more experience on this earth. And the ones who seem to really feel youthful when you're around them are those who have things that they're passionate about. They're growing, they're serving other people, they're giving back, they're doing things like that. I think those are some really big pieces. The other thing that I don't think we've mentioned that I think is absolutely huge is activated charcoal. Did we talk about that? I don't think we talked about that on this episode. I mean, don't you think that's an important part of anti-aging?
I do. It is hands down. Activated charcoal is hands down the most important thing that I've seen that a person can take, that they can do, that will extend lifespan. Hands down. I don't know of anything else that comes closer. They did a study on rats where no matter when the rats took it, at what phase in their life, it extended their lifespan by 50%. Mm-hmm. It is hands down. Now, I was saving it because I was going to talk about it and we were going to do a whole health episode, and I'll dive deeper into it then. But yes, you are very much right to be that.
Okay, well, that can be a tee up.
So your three are getting weight off of you from the past.
Yeah, it's the emotional healing. It's never stop growing. And I would definitely say, like, if I had to pick a third one, it would definitely be eating living foods. Eating living foods. That would be my top three.
And I think and for me, it's the same. It's the mind. Get your mind right together all the way. It's going to be the foods as well. And I forget what I close with, but it's on there. What was my third? I know it was the mindset, it was the food, and it was environment.
The environment is so important.
So those are my three. So together you got 6. Well, you really got 5 because we're on the same page with the food.
We are.
Well, we got any closing things before we wrap this one up for tonight?
I would just say that this is another one. I think it's also like the language. I think that's a big part. I think we have to remove this idea of aging and live life to the fullest and actually believe that it's possible for life to get better and better every single day. Like, what if we all had held that affirmation of my life is getting better and better every single day. I am getting better and better every single day, or whatever affirmation works for you. But just remove the conditioning and the brainwashing about this whole idea of aging. That's the one thing I'd like to leave people with today.
I don't even know what better way to end a podcast than with that. So guys, you heard her. You heard my wife. Literally, you heard what she said. Change your self-talk.
Change your self-talk.
Your life is getting better every day in every way. All right.
Yes.
This has been yet another episode of the Ascended Life Podcast. Thank you guys for tuning in. Next week, we will be talking about, we can go sky's the limit here. We just got so many topics.
Yeah. It's a surprise.
So many. I think we're at a point now where we can start taking stuff. So why don't y'all, because these episodes are rolling out on Wednesday, so why don't y'all message us and start to give us some ideas. Yeah, comment.
Ideas in the comments.
Like, subscribe. Let us know what you think. This has been the Ascended Life Podcast. Peace and love to y'all.
Peace and love. Thanks, everybody.
There it is. See, I can't close this until you do that love thing. I can't.
Peace and love.
Ascended Life Podcast.
We're out.